Howdy, of you delicious people. I'm here today to talk about Wonder Woman 1984. So, reasonably, here is really a warning right out of the gate. I am going to be honest about this movie and this movie review. Whether I like it, whether I don't, I'm going to be honest about it. Really, when looking at the very first Wonder Woman movie, I would walk out of it saying that I was disappointed in the movie. That ultimately I didn't much enjoy the movie. It kind of felt like a ripoff of Captain America to me when watching the very first Wonder Woman movie. And when looking back on that now, I think I can probably watch the Wonder Woman movie and probably actually feel differently. And maybe I could enjoy that movie. And maybe I could be much more feeling better about that film than I could in the first iteration of time of which I had seen it. More than likely, I probably will have to go back and watch that movie to see if I feel differently about that film now that time has passed. So now that I've said that, now that I've kind of cleared the air for Wonder Woman, the first movie, let's talk about Wonder Woman 1984. And I'm probably going to pull back a little bit from kind of what my true legitimate probably thoughts were about this film when first while watching it, because ultimately this movie, I found this movie to kind of feel like a movie that has very clunky dialogue. Every interaction that I have within any of these people, I really don't quite understand the writing of this story whatsoever. If anything, there are portions of this film where I have to kind of question everything. I have to why did they make those choices? Why did they do this? What is going on with the lasso of truth in this movie? I'm just kind of baffled by the lasso in this movie being used the way it does, as well as seemingly the lack of actual fight scenes in this film. I was kind of baffled by that. So we have Kirsten Wiig, who's ultimately in this movie as a villain. What role does she actually play as a villain in this movie? I do not know. I cannot really understand her actually seemingly being a Wonder Woman villain in this movie. Uh, we ultimately have Pedro Pascal, who ultimately is Maxwell Lord, who I believe um, is in this film and much more of the focal pointed uh, character and or uh, has much more focus in this film, even much more so at points than even Wonder Woman herself does. Uh, we do have Chris Pine in this film, Steve Trevor. He's in this film. How he's in this film is very baffling, and I'm like, so what now? This is how they have him in this film? Okay. That's a different approach. A different approach. It feels a little quantum leap like approach to me, but hey, it's a different attempt it's a weird, different attempt. Um, so there is some. I'm really trying to. Okay, let's cut the mustard a little bit. Let's take off the sugar part. Let's not like sweeten this too much. This movie to me at points was hilarious, and not in a good way. Uh, this movie at some points was I was like, okay, there is a lot of odd choices going throughout this entire movie. There is a there is one item that has to just bizarrely just be plopped into the hands of people to create this entire story to just be had. Just like Superman Returns. Just kind of plops down the villainous thing to where uh like this is kind of like Thor the Dark World in measures of like of coming up with a thing that creates villains in this movie. It's like to me, I felt like this story really very much reminded me of Amazing Spider-Man 2, the movie. It kind of gave me vibes of that, especially with Kirsten Zwig's character being anywhere close to being next to Diana at points. It kind of gave me a lot of Spider-Man 2 or Amazing Spider-Man 2 like vibes. Really, Kirsten Wig had told me via some interview, not told me personally, told me through some interview that she had gone and had to do an hour's worth of working out and then 4 hours of choreography and then ultimately had to do probably a number of other things, probably reading scripts, probably doing actual uh, filming for that day. And I could not rationalize even the first hour of working out for Kirsten Wig uh, because put her in clothes the entire time. Just it, did anybody see her six pack abs throughout this entire movie? No. Did anyone see Gal Gadot's six pack abs through any portion of this movie? No. Well, it didn't need to work out. It didn't. But anyways, so going into this film, I I thought that there is seemingly a part of the Amazon Themyscira in this movie. So ultimately, if you guys were thinking that this was going to tie in to the Themyscira, then ultimately it does. It does tie. So justifiably, yeah, um, it is completely and utterly uh, like I think the tying to Themyscira doesn't really have much to do with the rest of the story, but a lot of this stuff doesn't quite exactly tie to the rest of the story with a lot of things, so it's completely okay. So, anyways, let's go into that double five timed territory. Reasonably, at the end of the day, hopefully that you did not end up getting a HBO Max subscription to watch this film, ultimately, I would probably suggest you to try to just kind of wait it out. Like, I ended up seeing this the day that it came out, and I went on to Movie Playbox or Movie Box and just kind of sifted through whichever link could get me to watch this for absolutely free. Because it's not technically, from what I've seen on Movie Pro on the Movie Pro app just yet. But I would probably just wait it out till reasonably. You have a really good a version of this on some free movie app somewhere, and then watch it there. I would just kind of wait it out. I wouldn't buy a HBO Max subscription just to see this movie. If you're already going to see a lot of other HBO Max content, then by all means, then go and get an HBO Max subscription. But I would say reasonably go just for the fact that you're going to see more than just this movie through that service. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So in the very beginning of this film, we have a obstacle course-ish like scene where ultimately we have Diana as a younger child who is going into this obstacle course against much older, seasoned women. And we have it to where her mentor, who ultimately is Antiope. Antiope? Robin Wright, who ultimately is telling her it's like, hey, like, most of these women have been very seasoned women. If anything, just kind of like kind of just watch, watch and kind of take it easy. Don't really try to blow everybody out of the water. It's like just kind of get it to where like you're comfortable in this and that. So we have Diana and all these other women. We have to where seemingly it seems like Diana is doing really well compared to everyone else. It seems that she is bizarrely ending up trying to find her own route to have like a little like slide thing instead of having everyone else ride on horses. She's going through this slide thing to try to get through this obstacle course faster. She tries to end up getting to win this obstacle course, but someone wins instead, leaving Diane just kind of just distraught by this whole thing. And then we just push on into what is 1984. This flashback of Diana doing this obstacle course has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the movie. It's just there. So, in the very beginning of this movie, we have to where seemingly Barbara is ultimately jogging and ultimately almost gets hit by a car for Wonder Woman to kick the car out of Barbara's way, so ultimately the car does not take down Barbara. So, pushing on into more of this movie, we have it to where Barbara is making her way to work, and Diana is ultimately there to meet Barbara at her work. So, within this dialogue which is to come with Diana and Barbara, because Diana really has to take a real true interest in Barbara, and like Diana wants Barbara to like go with her to dinner and be good friends and all this like weird uncomfortable stuff that like I'm like, is Diana trying to like get a relationship with Barbara, which is completely okay, but like hey, whatever, however you want to do your thing. But here's the dialogue that comes to follow within these transactions of Diana and Barbara, ultimately Kirsten Wig. So we ultimately have it to where seemingly Barbara is irrelevant at this place, with the exception of Barbara, or with the exception of Diana taking an interest in her. Everyone is thinking that, like, oh, you must be the new girl, because ultimately Barbara has so many degrees and all these things that ultimately Diana's like, wow, I'm impressed. We ultimately find out that Diana is wearing some cheetah high heels. And so Barbara's like, oh, yeah, like I guess you wear heels? Like I have problems wearing heels. Do women like still wear heels? Do women wear heels? And Diana's like, yeah, sometimes. Like, yeah, I guess. Sometimes. So we have to figure out whether or not women wear heels in this movie. And because Barbara has trouble wearing heels, she'll not only say that once, but then she'll say this again any portion of this story. But make sure everyone remembers that Barbara talks about heels. So that's great. So we have it to where, again, we have a dinner date, Barbara and Diana, um, to go and have a dinner date. And so, really, we push on to have Barbara showcase Diana some kind of wish stone or dream stone or whatever they want to call this thing within this movie. And so, really, Barbara is telling Diana that this stone is really, really lame. And ultimately, it's probably not even worth anything. It's maybe probably just worth like $75. So, so Barbara is like, well, if this stone is really true, there's only one wish that I would have. Because cue us having to see Diana's seemingly place that she lives, where she has a photo that is horribly photoshopped of her at Trevor's ranch, and also just kind of really bad photoshopped pictures that she has that are supposedly black and white, because sure they are. Uh, and so, reasonably, within this movie, we have some people's wishes supposedly come true, and I guess again we don't really. I guess this is a wish stone, but then again, who knows? They kind of keep switching the name of whatever this is. So we have Barbara who wants to wish to be like Diana, and of course Diana's wish is to ultimately get back Trevor, the guy of which that she had lost in the very first movie. And so ultimately we have it to where immediately Barbara is all of a sudden like people actually like her after she makes this wish. And recently it seems that we have a character called Maxwell Lord, who is ultimately played by Pedro Pascal, who is of course the Mandalorian. And immediately I'm like, man, Pedro, all of a sudden, he does the Mandalorian, and poof, his career goes off. I don't know how many movies that I've seen him in after the Mandalorian had wrapped up, but man, good for him. So, Pedro is this Maxwell Lord character that, spoilers, he's also the villain in this movie. And but also he is the villain who at first seduces Barbara. Because really, Pedro is looking at any woman and trying to seduce them in any way means possible, because he is using his TV influence to seduce anyone. So we really have it to where at this party that Maxwell ends up seducing Barbara to end up finding out what is the stone that she has on her desk, and he ends up taking it from her and using it for himself, because really he is desperate to be able to get fame and fortune and to be able to excel in being successful, to ultimately be able to provide for his son. And so that is what his desperation is, to ultimately have unlimited power. So we have it to where ultimately Kirsten is being the fan favorite of everybody, to the point where she even can wear high heels and get this dress that looks really awesome and radical. But here's the thing: we also in this movie have it to where Wonder Woman, in the after the cuts, after the to the Themyscira part, we have it to where there is a guy who breaks into, or basically walks into some part of some store mall and grabs all this cash with three other guys. We ultimately have it to where these 3 to 4 guys end up making it out of this store, and one of them ends up dropping one of their guns because they're clumsy, and heaven forbid you actually have a perfect pocket or anything like that to hold a gun. And so we have a woman who screams, "Oh my god, a gun! It's a gun that is on the ground that nobody has in their hand, but a gun nonetheless." So everybody crazily scrambles because they hear the word gun in a mall, and it's not in anyone's hands. And so really we just have it to where, like, people are scrambling around because it's a gun. We have these guys who are really just running through these escalators, smacking people off to the side so they can run up these escalators. All these guys are bizarrely just running around this mall. Heaven forbid they find out where an exit of this mall is, because that's not what they do. So we have it to where Diana is swinging around through this mall like Tarzan, but with a golden lasso. This golden lasso does the weirdest, bizarrest things that I would ever picture a lasso do, but it does it, because ultimately this lasso can just do anything now, to the point of utter obscurity. But that's just the way it is in this film, to the point where somewhere in this movie, the goofiest thing that I see that this lasso does is catch a bullet out of the air. The lasso catches a bullet from out of the air. If only I could watch Tenet again and see a bullet go right back into a gun. No. A rope catches said bullet, pulls it back from being shot at Trevor, saving Trevor's life. So, again, we have Diana that's flying around with this rope and just ultimately, like, she is lassoing all these guys Because ultimately we have one of the men who grabs a child, and as per any lines that you've ever seen in a old 80s movie, we have the guy yelling, "I'm not gonna go back! I'm not gonna go back! Where are you gonna go back from? Wherever I said that I would not go back from." Okay, sure. So we have Diana, who's not really like knocking anybody out per se with this lasso, but she's just like kind of like roping them and then having to re-rope them and quasi take people out, but not quite really take them out. But she takes them out nonetheless. The visual that kind of strikes me the most is that at some point we have to have we have to have Wonder Woman who takes a kid, and we have to have the most slipperiest mall floor that I've ever seen in my life, because ultimately we seem to have like Wonder Woman almost kind of like sliding through this mall at some point, which I kind of didn't quite understand. But then also we have to have like Diana slide this kid into this teddy bear from quite a bit of distance. And I'm just like, say what? I don't know if she like kicked the kid into the distance or what she did. I think she either pushed the kid or like pushed the kid with her foot to slide the kid to into the teddy bear. But to me, this visual was just like baffling to me. I was so like I didn't know whether to be amazed by this visual or to just bust out laughing because I just like, what was this? And ultimately cueing later to where Wonder Woman is taking some people down and looking back at the kid where the kid's like, and Diana's like and taking people down, and I'm like, okay, what is this movie? So pushing on. So we have eventually Diana take these mall thieves down, and I'm like, man, all right, okay, let's get further on into this movie. So, like I said, we had Kirsten Wiig, who is slowly but surely taking her sweet time to eventually seemingly become Diana. And the thing at first is that she's wearing glasses. She is kind of like talking a little geeky, again, kind of reminding me of the dialogue from that Jamie Foxx would give to anyone from Amazing Spider-Man 2. Not that ultimately he was like like it's not like Barbara was addicted to Diana to where she had like pictures of him all over her wall, or ultimately she was uh having a birthday or whatever, but still. So we have it to where Barbara and Diana are going out to going out to the dinner, and so reasonably the dialogue that follows is not something that I would care to really repeat. But at some point they have to where ultimately Barbara is mentioning like, yeah, it doesn't really seem like you're a person that goes out much. It seems like you're a person that doesn't like I don't see you going out. Like I think you're very much a person that stays in. Like man, like I just don't think that you're a person that ever goes out in places. It's just I don't see you that way. You're a person that I think stays in. Like, what is this dialogue? I'm confused. I'm confused by this dialogue. Um, were these lines improvised? Was there a script? I need to ask. Um, but anyways, we have this dinner that really to me doesn't quite I didn't quite understand this dinner, but I guess it was just to help us get it to where we had time with both Gal and Kristen in a scene. And so this leads us to eventually seemingly have where Barbara and Dinah are walking home to ultimately get attacked by some man in this trench coat edge like suit that I would naturally assume would be a detective. He looks like the stereotypingly outfit of a detective, but he's not a detective. And so we have it to where ultimately this guy is knocking down Barbara because Barbara doesn't have Diana's real true essence quite yet. Uh, but Diana comes to Barbara's defense and ultimately has it uh, to where this schlub ends up being knocked away from Barbara. Barbara's like, "Oh my God, how did you do that?" And she's like, "Oh well, hey, it's just like using their body against them. Um, like if anything, I could probably teach you this sometime." So pushing on into this movie to the love scene between Barbara and Maxwell Lord. So we have it to where ultimately Maxwell Lord finds out that this is some wish or dream stone. And so ultimately, what his idea is to eventually do is to have his wish be that he wants to actually be the dream stone itself. And so reasonably, we have it to where within this wish, we have the stone completely seemingly disappear and it goes within Maxwell Lord. So we have to where we have Diana going to this seemingly business party as well. And ultimately, she ends up, when Barbara is making out with Maxwell in her office, we have it where Diana is meeting her Steve Trevor. The only thing is this does not actually look like Steve Trevor. It is some other guy that has the spirit of Chris Pine, Steve Trevor. But when when Dinah looks at this Steve spirited person, she ends up seeing Steve Trevor instead of this other guy. And when Steve looks in the mirror, he sees this other guy. And so it's quantum leap esh, but if like Scott Bakula, who played Sam Beckett in the show, like basically Chris Pine is the Sam Beckett into whoever this actual person is, and I guess Diana could be his Al, the imaginary friend which Sam sees. But it's kind of in reverse a little bit. It's kind of in reverse a tiny bit. But anyways, mood point to anybody. You'll probably understand if you've ever seen the Quantum Leap show. If you've never heard of that in your life, then ultimately I would just say watch one episode of it or just kind of hear the concept of the show, and then you might understand what I'm saying to you. but I always reference Quantum Leap a lot, and eventually I would just say watch the show. It's kind of interesting in some episodes. But anyways, so going into this, we have Diana, who has her Steve Trevor in someone else's body. So that's interesting. And so we have to where Chris Pine, or Steve Trevor, is ultimately now having to understand the time period of which he is in and having to adjust. So he's kind of like Captain America, quasi, if ultimately Steve Trevor actually had to do a lick of anything in this movie, which Captain America does in his film, but Steve Trevor does not in this movie. So we ultimately just have kind of Steve Trevor just eating Pop Tarts and drinking coffee and ultimately talking about how drastically different stuff is in this time period, and also him having to wear clothes that make him look like a pirate or make him look like he's from the 1984s. And then also eventually he's having to get onto an escalator, which is the weirdest thing to him. It's great. So pushing on, because there has to be a point to this review, we have Maxwell Lord, who ultimately is taking this wish stone and becoming it. And so ultimately he ultimately wants people to make wishes. He is finding the most influential people, or the people that have the most resources, and he is granting whatever wish that they want, with the exception of basically taking all of their power. To the point where Maxwell Lord is ultimately going and finding people that have endless resources. Like at first, we have it till Maxwell Lord grants this wish of some guy who has this big military force like backing, and so we have to where Maxwell Lord takes every resource of this guy and ultimately takes his security detail as well from him, where ultimately they just easily go and are now protecting Maxwell Lord. So pushing us on to where we have it to where Diana, when going into her work, ultimately she seems to be bumping into some people. It seems like there was one guy that ended up being like a part of the FBI and all kinds of other stuff. Like whatever the story needs, Diana just bumps into people into her workplace. Anyways, so we have it to where Diana ultimately at some point in this movie, and I don't really quite understand why, but we have where within this movie that, and again I don't remember even why this happens, but anyways, we have Diana and Trevor, where ultimately Trevor has to fly a plane, ultimately for that plane just to become invisible, I guess just to give the reference of the invisible plane within this movie. And don't really quite understand why that has to really be part of the movie. I don't really quite remember what actually happens to where they have to fly this plane, but there's a lot of stuff that's kind of misunderstood within this movie. But anyways, we have to have seemingly Diana find out who has the stone last. To where we find out that Diana has figured out that Maxwell Lord has the stone, so she has to find him. So she is chasing after him ultimately to finally become Wonder Woman yet again. To have to where Wonder Woman is buying this car from off this taxi driver to chase down Maxwell Lord. And here's the thing. So we have this guy in the middle of the desert because ultimately Diana buys the car from off this taxi driver and leaves him out the middle of nowhere to die. Why not just have the taxi driver sit in the back seat and, just not be in the middle of nowhere with nowhere to go? But I guess I digress. So we have this. We have Diane and Trevor now chasing after Maxwell Lord, and so we have Wonder Woman's Grandmaster plan of flying out of her car, not literally flying, but just jumping really high out of her car to ultimately jump right onto seemingly one of the cars of which that or one of these military-esque like vehicles that she is just consistently like she's crushing a lot of these vehicles, or ultimately she's sliding bizarrely underneath them as if this girl's bottom of her shoes are roller skates. Because I just don't quite understand how all of a sudden her shoes are so slippery. Quasi confused, but it is what it is. So, at some point, we have Diana who ultimately has to get some sled like piece from some part of some vehicle to just slide her way through seemingly being under any vehicle, and to where eventually we have it to where she's sliding under one vehicle and people are starting to blow the tires out of that said vehicle, and we have it to where Diana is just grabbing on to, I think, like the muffler piece of this car, or the middle piece of the car. Ultimately she can just grab onto. So bizarrely this car ends up like completely flipping over to where Diana is flipping from this car to ultimately land right onto, coincidentally, Maxwell Lord's vehicle, to where ultimately Diana is asking Maxwell Lord, hey, where is the stone? Where is the wish dream stone thing? And we have to where Maxwell Lord is telling her, well, you're looking at it. So, reasonably, we have it within here now that this is really confusing to Diana, but I know full well that Maxwell Lord is actually the wish dream stone thing. So, we have to where reasonably we have the rope incident where ultimately the military vehicles are trying to fire upon anywhere to have bullets being flown into Trevor's taxi, and of course that's where we get the rope catching of a bullet. Sure. So Trevor crashes his taxi into one of the military vehicles to, I guess, seemingly latch onto it with like car to car, to where it seems like this, to where it seemed that Trevor can jump onto this car, this military tank-ish like thing, and seemingly break the weapon that is shooting out bullets in half with his leg, because I just don't quite understand why Trevor is kicking this weapon with his leg, knowing full well you can't bend metal with your foot. But that's just me. That's just me just thinking out loud. But anyways, so pushing on, we end up having Diane and Trevor, like Maxwell Lord is a very elusive cat, and ultimately he gets away from all this. He gets away from all this for story reasons, and leading us to have Maxwell Lord continue to get more wishes from all these other people, and with all these wishes, he obtains power. The only problem is that while he keeps doing all these wishes, there is a side effect to every wish. We have it to where Barbara ends up finally getting stronger and getting seemingly the same abilities as Diana. To seemingly where she opens up her fridge and she breaks the refrigerator door. Here's the thing though, when Barbara ends up taking this refrigerator door, this does not come off the way properly to make it look like she's strong armed the door open. No. This looks like the refrigerator door when she opened this thing fell off to the side, meaning that this does not look justifiably like she strong armed the door open. No. It honestly just looks like as soon as she opened it, the door just fell. And that does not look like strength. That looks like she has a very flimsy door, and her barely touching it made it to where the door of the refrigerator fell. Yeah. Nice try. Nice try. Nice try, movie, but it just doesn't quite look right. So, if anything, we're to naturally assume that Barbara is really, really strong to the point to where she has to have a gym membership to go into a gym to showcase how strong she is, which when looking at all the equipment that she was trying on, I'm like, well, if she's never been in a gym in her life within this movie, then justifiably I can see like this person like justifiably would look at all this stuff and be like saying, "Wow, I am pretty strong." Because recently she ends up like picking up like I think like a small dumbbell, and she's like, "You know what? I think I'm pretty strong." She ends up putting up this probably dumbbell that is probably the exact same size of the other dumbbell that she had probably just picked up, but it just looks bigger. And she's like, "Yeah, I think I'm doing this." And then all of a sudden we have her pick up, I would probably say, probably 75 pounds on both sides. So that's probably what? 145 pounds? Because ultimately, if. Because it says on the dumbbell that it's 25 per one plate. So 25 times 6 is, yeah, it's 75. So 75, that's 140. So that's 150? Yeah, so that's like 150 pounds. And she lifts it over her head. And so recently, especially if any of those weights were actually probably fake, then, but I'm assuming those probably weren't actually fake. But reasonably, that sounds like some reasonable weights to lift, especially if you probably had to crazily work out like any number of any of those superheroes would have to forcibly do. But again, I would probably assess that probably most of those things are probably fake weights. But again, who knows? But obviously the silver things that Barbara lifted do not look like any normal weights that I've ever seen in my life. So those were probably actually fake. The other ones were probably actually real. But anyways, so going on into here, we have Barbara that is realizing how strong she is. Not very much in the unbreakable Bruce Willis way, but good enough. So, Barbara is realizing how strong she is, and good for her. So, what she ends up doing is now that she seems to be uberly strong, she is now treating everybody like crap. She's forgetting about her sunglasses or her glasses. She's ultimately reconfronting the detective guy that had been giving her crap before, and she ends up just kick flinging him. So she ends up kicking this guy. He flies about 10 to 20 feet, and she does this repetitively. Like she's either fleeing the guy or she's kicking the guy to where he flings 20, like 10 to 20 feet. And I'm just like, okay, well, I kind of really love the wire work that you're doing there, the string work that you're doing there. Like, this is really great. So, you ultimately have it to where Barbara is, like, feeling so good about beating the crap out of this guy that treated her like garbage before. She's like, man, I could do this all day. She's ultimately looking at other people and they're like, hey, what did you do? And she's like, it's none of your business, as she walks away villainously. So we ultimately have it to where Maxwell Lord is asking people their wish, ultimately even talking to his son, ultimately asking his son what his wish is, and we have it to where his son's wish is to ultimately live with his father. It's like, well, Maxwell is just like, well, you do that already. Like, what do you actually wish? You could have fame and fortune, and you could have whatever you want. It's like, if anything, it seems that I am, if anything, it feels like I am becoming great, and like I want you to live in that same light. I want you to be, I want you to be like me, and so we have it to where Maxwell's son ultimately asks, it's like, well, I wish to have your greatness. And Maxwell's like, no! Because ultimately, he doesn't want his son to be this, like, this person that takes all of Maxwell's power. And so recently we have Maxwell who is desperately grasping at anybody to ultimately have them wish again, to see if his thing still works. He asks someone if, hey, do you wish for me to meet the president? And ultimately this guy says, oh, of course I would want you to meet the president. And we have it to where Maxwell Lord is asking this guy, like, didn't I grant you a wish before? And the guy says, yeah, like, I wish for a Porsche. So, evidently we find out there's a bazillion people that all have Porsches now, bizarrely. And so, Maxwell Lord ultimately makes his way to talking to his driver, and ultimately his driver makes some wish to where traffic could part like the Red Sea. And so, recently, Maxwell Lord just bizarrely makes his way all the way to the White House because heaven forbid there's much security for anything. Diana and Steve could just walk into some airport hangar and ultimately just fly a plane and nobody tries to stop them or anything. It's just like, nah, just let Diana and Steve Trevor just fly a plane. It's okay. They're not going to get shot down or anything. Whatever. So, pushing on to having now Diana and Steve going into the White House because they know an FBI guy that ultimately is going to give them a grand tour of the White House because, sure. So, we ultimately have Diana and Steve that are making a tour of the White House, and we have ultimately just Barbara just walking her way into the White House like there's no security there ever in our lives. And so we have to where Maxwell Lord ends up making his way into the White House to talk to the president. And so we have to where Maxwell Lord is talking to the president. And he's like, you know what? Like, hey, president, like, hey, what are you wishing for there, buddy? What do you wish? Like, and so the president is just like, yeah, you know what? I think I can come up with something because you know what? I'm just so afraid of these places like the Egypt and Russia. Man, are they scary? There are these scary places. They really are. Like I feel like I'm so stressed. You know what? Maybe if I just had more nuclear vessels or weapons than any of them, maybe they would just hear me out. Maybe they would just take on to my side. Maybe they would just love me. You know? Because Egypt and Russia are just scary, scary places. So, we have to where Maxwell Lord is holding the hand of the president, seemingly getting his bizarrest, like, their like veins are popping out of their hands and it looks weird. We ultimately have Maxwell Lord that is like bleeding through the nose or bleeding from the nose because he's just so invigorated by these wishes. And I think his eyes are like getting like bloodshot or something. It's coming off really weird. And so we ultimately have Maxwell Lord who's like, well, that's great. I will give you all the nuclear vessels. I mean weapons. And in exchange, I want all of your influence. I want all of your power. I want your chain of command. I want like basically for you to just like if I say jump, you say how high kind of thing. It's like basically like I want you to answer to me kind of thing, and everyone does. So we ultimately have it to where Maxwell Lord is asking what the president is what he's up to, and the president just tells him everything. That ultimately uh, they're working on this satellite program that is taken from Star Wars. So wait a minute. So if we don't have, I don't know, gee golly, a movie that kind of feels like Amazing Spider-Man 2. And then, of course, we have to usually kind of squeak in little Disney or Marvel kind of quasi things here and there. Now we have to forcibly put in the word Star Wars within this movie. And I guess I can just be okay with that because I don't think they completely wrote this movie for a specific period like 1984 just to bring up Star Wars because ultimately that was in 1977. But still, like, I just don't think that they wanted to just do this movie and call it 1984 really just to tie in the word Star Wars. Do you think that's a possibility? I don't know. So, going into here, Maxwell Lord is like, God dang, well, I want this satellite. I want you to take me to a place that could connect me to all these satellites and have me be on the emergency broadcasting so I can be on every TV and every channel everywhere. And I need this now. So we have it to where, sadly enough, we find out that Diana has to fight Barbara in the White House. Uh, there is a fight out. Well, not even a fight scene. There isn't really a fight scene. It's just Barbara ends up making her way into the White House, flinging security guards and people along the way. And so Diana has to get into Wonder Woman costume to fling people or otherwise kind of do some kind of karate-esque like moves. We have Trevor, who is also learning how to do some combat skills on the fly. and so justifiably he has to learn a combat skill from somebody so that way he can use it and say, "Oh, I just learned this." Great. So we have to where Diana is fighting Barbara, and Diana is seemingly getting weaker to the point where she had gotten shot in the shoulder because ultimately her medallions ultimately couldn't ricochet anything in this movie, because I never see at one point Diana ricocheting bullets from off of her bracelets, because maybe we don't do that in this movie. So we ultimately push on to have Barbara just decking everybody to where she's even taking down uh, Diana, Wonder Woman, and ultimately Barbara is just like, man, so like I ended up like wanting to say that I wanted to be every bit like you, Diana, but looking at it now, I guess I didn't quite realize what that really meant until now. So we have it to where they seem to know who each one another is, and so because ultimately we had Diana, or we had Wonder Woman, who tried to with her lasso, or with her lasso, her tiara, ended up flinging that to hit all of the mall cameras in the mall to deck all the cameras out. But here's the thing, she didn't do that in the very beginning. She did that towards the end, which didn't make sense to me. But anyways, it is what it is. Uh, but yeah, so it seemed that Barbara and Diane, they knew who one another was. And so we have it to where in this movie, villainous person is not quite Cheetah yet. She's wearing. I don't know what it is with this movie. We had Maxwell Lord and his establishment, his home. He had like all kinds of cheetah prints all over his furniture, and like cheetahs everywhere, like cheetah skins and all this other stuff. We had Steve Trevor, who was trying on a bunch of clothes, and one shirt was a cheetah thing. We had Diana, who had cheetah high heels when she was talking to Barbara about like wearing high heels. I'm like, why are all these cheetah prints in this movie? Because you couldn't physically have cheetah in this film, so you had to just kind of like have a consistent reference to a character that doesn't really much exist in this movie. I'm confused. So I didn't understand why was there so many cheetah prints in this film. I just don't quite understand why. Um, it is what it is, I guess. But we have Barbara, who is in quasi cheetah-ish like tire, and she's ultimately making her way to get to Maxwell Lord, to where ultimately they are going to share a flight with one another, having Barbara remind Maxwell Lord, hey, you and me, we shared a desk once. So we have it to where Maxwell Lord is making it to the emergency broadcast esh like thing to have his face being seen all over the world and everywhere. And so ultimately we have it to where we have Maxwell mentioning to Barbara, it's like, hey, like, if anything, like, people are making wishes and I want to make them wish even more. And if anything, when they do make their more wishes, like, I can make a counter offer in exchange. That's what I've been doing. Ba, 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 ba. Because ultimately, the more wishes that people get, the more powerful Maxwell becomes. And so ultimately, because Barbara had quasi incapacitated Diana, Maxwell is feeling good about quasi teaming up with Barbara. So he ultimately asks her, "Hey, like, what do you want? Whatever you want. I'm feeling generous." And so Barbara's like, "Well, I no longer want to become anyone anymore. I just want to become the ultimate apex predator." And so that's when Maxwell's like, I like this. I like this decision. So we ultimately have Diana tell us that at some point in this movie that she has some like secret room where she can watch a lot of TV, and that she also has the Wonder Woman gold armor that was actually in Themyscira, I guess, to reference why she's going to wear this later on in the film, via that statue of which was present during that whole gauntlet thing that she was in with all the other Themyscirans. So we have it to where we have this reference of this armor, but we aren't going to actually see what it looks like because, heaven forbid, we showcase anything a little bit too early in this film. But we got to see that in a flashback form, a person had used this armor to seemingly take down this whole armor, to take down a whole army of men, which ultimately I don't know how this person did that, because all this person did was shield themselves from all this army, from this entire army attacking her all at once, and she was holding off from that, which I'm not quite understanding how this person beat an entire army by just shielding herself. Not quite sure, but I guess maybe she just wore them down. I don't know. But anyways, so pushing on even more so. So we have to where seemingly Maxwell Lord is going to this TV broadcaster place, and Diana is going to figure out where that is, and so she's going to intercept. So we have it to where she intercepts and ultimately is now wearing the gold armor, because here's the thing. She had to do some weird also quite thing that I didn't understand, is she had to do some weird lasso-esh like things in this movie. At some point, she had to like lasso a lot of stuff to save some kids, which ultimately her lasso falls out of her hand, and she and these kids drop onto the ground. But luckily, she still saves the kids, I guess, and any weird other bizarre things, like she ends up going and lassoing her lasso onto a plane where she then gets further into the sky, and she starts quasi flying into the sky and then lassos a cloud as well, which I thought was bizarre, and then just like continues to start quasi flying, which doesn't really quite feel like flying, but then she has to reattempt this later on in the movie when she eventually wins. So, moving on, I'm going to pause here for a second. Okay, so pushing on. So, we have to where Wonder Woman is making her way to reasonably just quasi really just fight Maxwell Lord, but not even really actually doing that. So, but we have to kind of get through Barbara, or quasi, I guess, Cheetah. I guess Cheetah at sorts, because really we have to where Wonder Woman comes in with the, of course, gold armor now to fight off Cheetah. because reasonably, like, we have it to where Barbara had been talking to Trevor, and Trevor is ultimately mentioning it's like, well, hey, like, you know what? Do you really still need me? Do you need me here now? Like, ultimately, I'm like, I think that you could probably do without me. Like, I think that you need to like announce or denounce your wish, because ultimately, you having me here is making you weaker. So if I leave, maybe you'll get your power back. Because ultimately, you're weakening because I'm here. I'm weakening you. So you ultimately have to where Diana and Trevor kiss for one last time, and Trevor says that he's already left, even though he's still there. And we have Diana, who denounces her wish, runs off to go and fight Maxwell and Cheetah. And so we have it to where Diana is, I guess, flying off to get her armor to fight Cheetah at night, where ultimately you can't see the bad special effects, I guess, of them kind of fighting it out, which really isn't much of a fight out. It's just kind of like kind of a little kind of like shoving match a little bit, and really we kind of have Cheetah kind of using her Cheetah-ish like abilities and this and that, but this is ultimately just for them to both go into this water where it seems like there's also electricity within this water, and it seems that at some point Diana ends up choking Cheetah under the water, but Diana ends up getting her from out of the water, so that way Cheetah is not exactly dead. To ultimately just have Diana go into seeing Maxwell Lord having seemingly within this environment that he's in, having a fan blow on him way too hard, and have things flying around. And so Maxwell Lord is going on TV telling everyone to make a wish. So he's taking every TV of every part of the world to ultimately telling everybody to make a wish, that like they need to be able to wish, and to be able to have any number of anything that they have ever wanted. It seems like people are making wishes. There's some random girl who asks to be famous, and so everybody is clamoring in front of her building. We have uh, one woman wishing for some Irishman to go back to where he came from, and so every Irishman in the world is getting handcuffed. And we have the Irishman who is talking to this diner lady, to tell her that he wished that she had dropped dead, and so he makes her drop dead. And so everybody is seemingly and bizarrely all getting their wishes, and we ultimately have seemingly Maxwell pushing to be under this weird, bizarre light thing, that ultimately he is now feeling every person in the world all making their wishes come true. And eventually we have Alistair, I believe his name is, that is seemingly Maxwell Lord's uh, son. And so recently we have it to where Diana is lassoing Maxwell Lord, because ultimately we find out that the lasso of truth doesn't just make people tell the truth, it also shows the truth. To where ultimately that's when Diana could put the lasso on Trevor for Trevor to be able to see the armor that ends up protecting this woman with this army attacking her. And so, reasonably, this lasso just does all kinds of things. It just might as well just, it can easily just. Why do we even need Diana? All we need is a lasso of truth. The lasso of truth can just beat everybody. So we end up having Alistair in this middle of the road place somewhere. Roll to me, he's calling out for his father. And so Diana is telling everyone through Maxwell Lord to denounce their wish, because ultimately everything, all the trouble and all the problems are coming from all their wishes, and so she is telling everybody through Maxwell Lord to denounce their wishes, and they are all, of course, doing this all simultaneously, all denouncing their wishes, and so really we have it to where Diane is also begging for Maxwell Lord to also denounce his wish because, like, look at your son, look what is happening with your son while this whole thing is all going on. And so Maxwell Lord is seeing his son and realizing that he's like, oh my god, my son is just somewhere doing something and he looks sad. I guess I should just denounce my wish. And so ultimately he does so and runs off to, I guess, find his son somewhere. And so that basically is to make it so that the president denounces his wish, and everybody is just bangers and mash. Everybody is just, we won, we beat evil this day, and so ultimately the Dreamstone or the Wish Stone is just never to have seen or heard from again, I guess, and we all won, I guess. This is the weirdest ending or just weirdest overall story that I've ever heard for a superhero film. But when looking at it, I'm basically thinking, like, you know what? Maybe Captain Marvel wasn't that bad. Maybe even X-Men The Dark Phoenix still maybe wasn't that bad. It seems that they might have had some quasi-rational story coming out of those things after watching this film. And so maybe I judge too harshly about other films because at some point there's going to be some other film that is going to be a little bit story wise just not quite all that there, or reasonably this story had no rational thing in my head to just be like, okay, like I sat through 2.5 hours of this thing. I didn't even want to care to go through the end credit scene. I kind of rewatched what the end credit scene was on YouTube and found out, oh, hey, great. You have the original Linda Carter, who ultimately is seemingly saving people in the town. Good for her. Great. The girl from the Wonder Woman TV show is, yeah, ultimately just saving people. Huzzah for her. And I don't know if that's going to happen in the other movies, but doesn't really matter. So, yeah, so going into this movie, I'm just like, this is just another DC film going out there. And ultimately, people are probably going to say that this movie is great, or people are going to say that this movie is awful, and people are going to have mixed feelings. Ultimately, I would just like to say that no matter how many times I've criticized this film, I was kind of really in my head really expecting this movie to be the worst movie I've probably ever seen in my life. And so really I came in here with heavily low expectations, and because I was like, why is this movie being pushed to HBO Max, even though it is also coming out in theaters on Christmas Day? I have never really seen a movie that has been released on Christmas Day and it is a huge success. And so ultimately, when seeing at the very end of this Wonder Woman movie, where we have Wonder Woman just walking off into this Christmas decoration like establishment, ultimately talking to this guy who was Steve Trevor, but now is a just the guy who isn't Steve Trevor is the other guy, and ultimately he is wearing the outfit that Steve Trevor says was a pirate outfit. We ultimately have Gal Gadot telling this guy that, yeah, hey, you're looking really good in those clothes. He's like, yeah, I guess I do. I'm gonna walk off now. So most of this movie made no rational sense. But at the end of the day, that's all I have to say about Wonder Woman 1984. Just a movie that just kind of already met my expectations of how it was going to be or how well received to me it was going to be. So I guess I can't really have much to just really go out of my way to complain about anything or just to heavily bash this movie. If I felt like uh, if I kind of mostly just felt like I kind of just thought that this movie was goofy, and I hope that that just comes off as anything more than that. That I just thought that this film was overly goofy, and I didn't quite understand it. I didn't quite understand a lot of the stuff that was done throughout this film, and maybe some people feel the same, or people feel the opposite. That, oh no, this is like another just kind of a good film or whatever. And ultimately, I'm quite seeing the opposite. I am kind of just baffled and confused by this movie. But again, it already met the expectations that I already had while going to this one, which was severely low. And so it just kind of just met those expectations. And I guess I could be just completely fine about that. I'm not outraged about this film on how like it didn't do better than I thought, because look at any review that I've done of a DC movie prior to this point, if ever, with the exception of me always talking about me liking the Batman Michael Keaton films, the Christian Bale Batman films, or the Christopher Reeve Batman films, or whatever. Um, and then maybe liking the Man of Steel film, and that was about it. And then everything else was just what it is, with the exclusion of Suicide Squad, which I visually liked that movie, but there's stuff about it that was kind of mixed about that too. But anyways, so that's all I want to say about this film. It's 2.5 hours, and I didn't understand why. Justifiably, there could have been a lot of cuts going on to this film to make this a much shorter film, but I guess they ultimately thought, man, we need to make this film as long as it is because Avengers was 3 hours. So I guess that's what they were trying to go with, the longest film that they could possibly make, and that is what this film is. So I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.